with somebody you should absolutely know. Maggie Miles is a freelance journalist. And I'm super excited because, real quick, share secret, like I've always wanted to write.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so I want to hear about your writing and all your stories. So freelance journalist, what does that mean exactly?
So basically, I don't work for any certain publication. So when I have an idea, I write a pitch, I come up with an idea, find people to interview, and then I pitch it around to different editors, newspapers, magazines, places like that. And if they accept it, then I write the story for them.
Okay, and so how do you come up with the ideas?
It's a lot of like talking to people. If I hear about an interesting person and I'm like, okay, they have a really cool story to tell or that should be written about, I will see if they would like, to do an interview, and then I'll pitch their story. Or a lot of times people will reach out. A lot of times, like different publications I write for too. Sometimes people will write in with an idea, and then an editor will be like, oh, I know that Maggie likes to write this type of thing, so they'll be like, hey Maggie, you want to write about this? But yeah, it's a lot of just like talking to people, like being out and about and meeting people and finding stories that way. Or like if I hear about a new business or all sorts of things.
Sure. And so what publications have you written for so far?
I've written for the New York Times, the BBC. Well, I did a podcast, journalism for a podcast for the BBC. And then Palm Springs Post here in town.
Nice.
And then a bunch of other like regional smaller ones, the Virginian Pilot on the East Coast, and
so freelance journalist means you don't have a steady paycheck all the time.
Yeah, that is what that means. Yeah.
So that's got to be a little bit of a scary thing.
Yeah, especially in California.
Sure. So how long have you been doing this?
I have been doing this for a few years now. Let me think. Like, I used to do it on the side while I was working in restaurants and things like that. So I would have like a side gig, and I just started writing a little. I went home to North Carolina for like a year and a half, and that's where I first started writing a wellness column because I studied nutrition as well, and I realized I liked writing about it more than I liked seeing clients one-on-one. So I pitched to do a wellness column to my hometown newspaper. And so I would do that on the side while I was working in a restaurant, and then just kind of like kept building up from there until I could do it.
So it's piece by piece, right? Yeah. And then finally you get to the point where you have enough business to maintain your lifestyle.
Exactly.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, and it's always different. Sometimes I have like a ton of articles in 1 month, sometimes not as many. So
Right. Well, that's so cool because, like I said, so I've always like wanted to write, and there's those moments where you feel like you're just flowing and writing these things, and then there's a year where I couldn't write 2 sentences. Yeah, like writer's block.
Yeah,
it's a thing. Like, do you have that often, and how do you push through that?
Like sometimes I can just sit down and write it really quickly, and sometimes, especially if it's like a bigger story or someone more well-known or something, I'll feel more pressure, but then I realize it's like all a mental thing. Once I really sit down, I
just get to flowing.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. So what has been one of your favorite stories that you've done so far?
Let's think here. I covered the hurricane here for the New York Times.
Oh, wow.
Which was really fun. I mean, I have a lot of favorites, and I do investigative stuff. I do features. I do breaking news. So I probably have favorites like in each of those categories, but doing that for the New York Times was really fun because I got to just like be out on the boots on the ground, like walking around, talking to different people and finding out their stories and what they were going through and writing about that, and also kind of telling the story of Palm Springs as well.
Yeah, kind of cool. And investigative pieces.
Yes.
What is that like?
When I was just writing, I was doing my wellness column, and it was for kind of like a lighter tourism kind of publication. And so I had just done kind of lighter pieces, and I reached out to this newspaper called the Outer Banks Voice, who does more serious newsy stuff. And he was like, okay, well, let's just start you off doing some, like what you've been doing with us, and then we'll see how it goes. And then the next day, or a couple days later, I got a message from this woman who, and this is like a little bit more of a serious topic, but it was 10 women who had been sexually harassed by a CEO or executive director of a domestic violence shelter.
Whoa.
Yeah. So they reached out and they were like, we heard you're a writer and we thought maybe, you would look into this for us and write about this. So I reached back out to the editor. I was like, I know you said that I should just keep doing some lighter features, but I just got this message. And he's like, go for it. Like, let's do it.
So what was that like?
That was, it was my first time I was ever writing anything like that. So it was, I was definitely like nervous, and it was a big learning experience, but just like talking to the women and being able to tell their stories, because they had like reached out to law enforcement, they'd reached out to the board of directors there, and no one had done anything about it. So we actually, to be able to write the story, he was, they did an investigation because we put it out there, and they fired him. He did like a forced resignation, and they changed things. So
wow.
Yeah, so that was really cool to be able to help the women feel like their voices were finally heard.
Right.
It was the first time they felt like someone was, trying
paying attention.
Yeah,
and how interesting that it comes around where it's like you're just starting, you've never done it.
Yeah.
And they're like, can you please help us do this?
Yeah.
Right. Wow, that must have been really an interesting experience.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah, so that felt really good to be able to, write about their story.
Yeah, very cool. So before we started, you said that you had lived in Mexico for a short while.
Yes.
And a very interesting reason. So tell us a little bit about you deciding to go there and what you were doing while you were there.
So I was helping out with an English language newspaper there. It's called the Oaxaca Times. And it was a woman who she had come like in the 80s to the U.S. So she learned English while she was here, and she ended up marrying an American man, and then she went back to Oaxaca, and so she started it. So it's been going. It used to be a paper newspaper that she would print out like for a couple decades, and then she was getting older, so her daughter took it over, and her daughter's in her 20s, and she kind of turned it into a video thing, like she brought in social media, and we would go around and take videos of different businesses, different artists, because art is really big in Oaxaca.
Sure.
Restaurants, all sorts of things like that, and we would go do interviews with.
And how long did you live there?
For 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
Yeah.
And did you find it like an easy adjustment when you moved there? I mean, it's very different from where you came from, right?
Yeah. Because I've traveled a lot, so that's always been something that's kind of natural for me. It's never really made me nervous, but I did like living there because it was more of it's like a colonial city, and it's a small city, but it's not on the beach, so it didn't necessarily have that kind of like beach resort kind of like tourist kind of vibe. Right. So it felt easy to kind of like get into a normal day-to-day life there.
Now, have you been back recently?
I have not been back since I came to Palm Springs, so it's been like a year and a half.
Yeah. And what brought you to Palm Springs?
Okay, so that's actually a funny story as well. So when I moved down to Mexico, the newspaper, that was volunteer. So in Oaxaca. So I wasn't actually making money from that. And I ended up coming back for a while, and I got a job with because I was like, I didn't necessarily think I could make a living just from freelance writing at that point. So I got a job as a content writer for a tech company.
Okay.
And I ended up staying here a few months with a friend because they had just moved here, and I was visiting them when I got the job. It was a remote job, but you couldn't be out of the U.S. So I had to stay here for a while. So they were like, just stay with us. And then I started to kind of get to know Palm Springs. And then I ended up going to Mexico. And I think I worked at that job for like 8 months, and it just felt like it was like we were working for like fast food, like writing, the clients were like fast food companies and like oil companies and stuff like that. And it just felt like, and it was very technical writing, and it just didn't feel like me at all. Right. But it was like, I've never made this much money before, and it was like safe and everything. But I was really starting to like my gut, like more and more over the months. I was like, I really
can't do this.
Yeah, like this isn't for me. And I remembered I read something once that was like, what if you just stay in the safe thing, and you never knew if you quit doing that and went after the thing you really love, maybe you could make like 3 times as much money doing that, and you're doing something you love, but you've never tried because you stayed in the safe thing.
Right.
So I ended up leaving that job, and I put on my my Instagram, I made a post, and I was like, I just want to put this out there that this year I'm going to get into the New York Times. Like, I will have a piece in the New York Times. And literally, I was sitting like in a cafe in Oaxaca, and I was writing for a few smaller publications at that point. And out of nowhere, the senior editor of the national news desk at New York Times sent me a message on LinkedIn and said, hey, I saw that, I had my location still as Palm Springs. So he was like, I saw that you are in the Palm Springs area. I was wondering if you would want to be our like on-call freelancer. So whenever anything happens there, we will call you and you write about it. And I was like, is this a scam? Like, I still don't even know how he found me. So like, I looked him up. I'm like, okay, that's like, it's
wow.
Really. And so I wrote him back, and we had a chat, and he was like, yeah, like, let's do it. So then I ended up coming here, and then like within a few months I started getting stories,
getting jobs, and doing the things. Wow, that's awesome! You put it out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's a real thing to put out. You have to put it out there.
Yeah.
You have to put it out there, and it sounds like such a I don't know, like one of those, I forget the term, like fluffy. Like, I'm manifesting it. I'm putting it out in the universe, but it's so true.
Yeah, and
it's so true.
The funny thing is that I had gone to apply for like an apprenticeship with the New York Times maybe like a year and a half earlier, and I was trying to write up my cover letter and everything, and then I looked into who the other apprentices were in that current batch, and they were all like, they'd all gone to like Harvard and all these big, and they'd already written for all these huge publications, and I got so intimidated. I was like, there's no point in me even applying for this, because I don't have anything. I just written for, community news at that point. So I didn't end up applying. So I was like, there's no way. So it was like really coming full circle, because then like a year and a half later, they reached out.
You were.
And I started actually writing for them. Yeah.
That's awesome. So exciting.
Yeah.
Do you write creatively as well, like fictional stories and things like that?
No, but I do try to be as descriptive as possible in my stories. So I do have people who read my stuff often. They tell me that maybe I should try to write, a fiction, because it kind of can, I try to push the envelope as much as possible in that direction.
Sure. What do you like to read?
Oh, well, let's see.
I know, right?
I really, like, I've always been into, like, authors like Jack Kerouac and Ernest Hemingway and people like that. Yeah, like the classic stuff. Nice. Yeah, people who write about like traveling, adventure, things like that. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Mm-hmm. So, again, in a business or in a profession like this, there's a lot of unsure times. Yeah. Until I think you get to the point where you like, okay, no problem. I know that something next is coming. Like, something's coming down the pipe, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What was your self-talk like when you were really just bridging that? When you were just really taking that step, saying, this is what I'm going to do. Yeah. Like, what was your self-talk like? How did that work out?
I just had to, like, when I moved here, it wasn't a guaranteed thing. Like, it was kind of like an on-call thing with them. So, and I was going from paying $250 for my studio in Oaxaca. Yeah. So it was like, and I pay a lot more here. So
yeah, that's for real. Like, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, it was a huge leap, and I just had to tell myself that it was all going to work out, and it did. Yeah. So I think it's, yeah.
Well, that's like really that moment where you're like, well, you could have been comfortable and just stayed in your little $250 apartment and done the thing. Exactly. But then where would the New York Times, like, where would that even have gone? Yeah. Because even if you manifest it, you put it in the universe, like, you still have to make the forward steps.
Exactly.
You still have to say, okay, well, I'm going to also take the next step to put myself in the best position possible to make that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's part of your success in this job.
Yeah. I think it's like, like taking that leap of faith and like showing that you are, willing to do that and like take a risk. Yeah. And then hopefully that just,
exactly. It's like, I used to hear this joke where it was like, this man, every day prayed to God. He's like, I just want to win the lottery. I just want to win the lottery. And then God was like, well, you have to buy a ticket. Yeah. So it's like, you're never going to do anything if you don't buy the ticket.
Exactly.
Yeah. So So how do you, so now here you are, you've got your steady business. Like what would be the next step for you? Like where do you see that going from here?
You know, I want to keep pitching to larger and larger publications. Like I would like to do more travel writing. I would love to get into like Conde Nast, you know, like things like that.
What is that? I'm sorry.
Oh, that's like it's like a travel magazine.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that seems like your jam.
Yeah. And, just, I would love to keep writing profiles on more, you know, more notable people, more interesting people. You know, maybe one day being on the cover, or not on the cover, but having a cover story in Vanity Fair.
Wow, right? Put it out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm putting out here right now like I did on my Instagram post. So.
Wait, stay tuned on that for sure. So you did you did talk a little bit about something you read that really motivated you, but best advice a person's ever given you?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Or something that you've read or even wrote yourself where you were like, this is it.
Yeah. I think it's really just like believing in yourself. Yeah. Just people who have read my stuff, and maybe when I'm, you know, having moments of self-doubt, and just like reassuring me that I'm on the right path, and just to believe in myself. Basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the self-doubt, no matter what, it doesn't, I think it just doesn't ever go away.
Yeah.
It's just
monkey mind.
The monkey mind. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I think we just learn to manage it a little bit better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's much more fleeting.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's there for a second, and you're like, get the fuck off me, bitch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. So now if somebody was watching this and they were like, I want you to tell my story, or she's the perfect person to write my story, how would they get in touch with you?
My portfolio, my website is maggiemilesjourno.com. So it's Maggie Miles, MAGGIEMILES, Journo, which is like a short for journalist. So JOURNO.com. And then, I guess that's the best way.
Yeah. And is there a story that you've read recently where you're like, man, I wish I had written that.
Ooh, that's
been a part of that
too. Let's see here. I'm gonna have to think about that one. Maybe. I think just like any story where people are, you know, giving a voice to someone who may not typically be heard. Yeah. So any story like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, just if you do want to be a writer, I think it's about just doing it every day. You know, just like keeping it going, keeping moving forward with it.
So do you, in saying that, do you journal every day? How do you, when you say you write every day, like what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I just am always like write every day with my assignments, and sometimes I do personal stuff just for me. But I would just say it's like the forward motion, you know, because like me when I was in Oaxaca and I didn't even think I could get into the apprenticeship, so I didn't do it, but then I just kept going, you know, I kept writing and like trying to get more assignments,
and also your confidence. You know what I mean, like having the practice or whatever, the repetition over and over again just automatically gives you more confidence, whether or not you actually are aware it's happening.
Exactly.
So then it's like, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to write for the New York Times this year. And then what the fuck happens? They just say, Maggie, will you write for us this year? And you're like, yes.
Exactly.
Yes, I told you. I love that so much. It's so inspiring.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, give me a hug. Until next time, everybody.